All right, class, we're going to get to the last set of video here for the market strength ones. Now, excuse me, the market strength ratios, there's only two of them, but these are the ones that seem to trip up you guys the most. So just make sure you listen carefully and pay attention to what I'm saying. If you have to pause your video or re-listen to it, again, that's why I did these all separately for us. So the first one is our PE ratio, and that's our price to earnings ratio. Now, for anybody who plans on getting into buying stocks as a side gig, hobby, whatever, because most of your retirements will be in a 401k that's managed by somebody unless you do your own. The stock picking that you may do in your lifetime, PE ratio is one of those metrics that's used by Wall Street to evaluate how good or bad a company is performing compared to their price. And that's why it's the price to earnings ratio. So they compare the price of the stock to the earnings of the stock. So if you take a look at the ratio itself, it says market price per share, and it's divided by the earnings per share. Now, earnings per share goes by EPS. So if you ever listening to CNBC, you will hear the announcers talk about earnings per share. We have spoke about earnings per share a little bit when it comes to dividends per share. Okay, so those are common terms that you'll hear whenever you're looking at things like this. But the PE ratio is one of the most commonly used metrics to evaluate a stock. The market price per share you can find on your spreadsheet at the very bottom in additional information. The earnings per share, though, is slightly different. We have all learned to do an income statement, and your last line is your net income. Well, in the real world of accounting, if you're preparing a income statement for a Fortune 500 company or any company that has common stock, the last line on their income statements are actually earnings per share. So if you take a look at your income statement, you'll see at the very bottom of the income statement under net income or net loss. In this case, the example that we have there is net income. You'll see the last line says earnings per share, and it'll give you a dollar amount. So simply plug those two numbers in to your ratio. So your market price on top and your earnings per share, or EPS, as it is designated. And that will give you your price to earnings ratio. It'll typically, most of the time, be a whole number to most of the time, depending on the market price. So just again, keep your rounding rules. The last one is the one that seems to trip everybody up. And a lot of it is because there's a calculation that you have to do before you do a calculation. So the dividend yield is another key metric that's used for investors to see if a stock is paying a good dividend or if it's not. So the keys that you need to know for your dividend yield is your dividend per share. Now, we have spoken about dividend per share. We just did a dividend question on your last exam, on your first exam. So dividends per share is something that we have spoke about prior. So it shouldn't be any different, and it shouldn't be anything new to you. The other half of that ratio is your market price per share. Your market price per share is easy. We already know where to find that. That's under our additional information. The problem lies with finding the dividends per share. So I am going to click over to the Excel spreadsheet so I can walk you through this calculation and give you the explanation behind it. Okay, so if you go to the additional information down at the bottom of your sheet, and I want you to take a look at 2014's numbers. Under the additional information, it gives you net cash flows, net capital, dividends paid, number of common shares, and the market price per share. Now, it does not tell you dividends per share. It doesn't tell you that at all. Okay? The key here is that you need to figure out your dividends per share. So the way you go about doing that is very simple, and it makes sense if you think about it. it tells you the total amount of dividends that you did pay, which according to this is the $31,400. Now, that money that you have there is the amount of dividends that you paid everybody. Okay, you paid everybody a total of $31,400. Now you need to figure out how many people did you pay that to? And that's the number of common shares that you see listed there, which is in cell C43. Okay, so if you go ahead and you divide that, that will tell you that you paid $1, 1.046667 cents per share. So if you round that, you're going to get to $1.05 per share. That is your dividend per share. So you would take that number, put it as your numerator, and you would divide by the market price per share, which in this case is 80. So literally, I'm going to end up giving you this answer, but I would love you to follow along with it. You're going to take the 1.46667 and divide by the $80 market price per share, which would give you a dividend yield of 1%. Your answer will be 0.01, but this is another one of those ratios that you need to change to a percentage. So that would be 1.0%. I believe that if I add some zeros to it, you actually get a bigger percentage, which would be 1.3%. So try to get it so it's 1.3%. That 0.3% may not seem like a lot in your world, but when you're talking in millions and millions and millions of dollars, for instance, just take $1 million in your calculator, take $1 million and multiply that by 30 cents. And you'll see that it makes a big difference how you actually go ahead and don't realize how much 30 cents in the small scale of things, that's $300,000. I did give you guys the example of my life in the accounting world where my boss made me look for a penny for a day, which is no fun. But again, it goes back to being attention to detail. All right, so this is the last video that I have for the ratios. I am going to go ahead and upload a email to you guys about this stuff, and I'm also going to upload a sheet of directions. So I wanted to go over the ratios first, which is what these videos are all there for you, and then we'll move on to the actual homework assignment that's going to be due concerning them. All right.